Hello wonderful people, it's Wild here. Today I'll be showing you how to build this stunning Victorian greenhouse. While this greenhouse is packed with ornate details, giving it a really rich and grand design, it is actually surprisingly simple to create. I'll be showing you step by step how to create this build and give you some ideas on how to decorate it. So let's get going. The materials you need for this build are on your screen now. Here is the outline for today's build. You can see it's essentially a 19 by 13 rectangle, but since there is such a lot of glass in this build, there are 3 wide gaps spaced evenly around the build for where the windows are going. You'll also see there is a different looking section towards the bottom of the screen. That's the front of the build where the door will be going. For this build, we kind of have 2 layers of walls. On this outer rectangle is where we'll be having all of the decoration, and on the inner rectangle we'll be having our glass as well as some dividing sections, and we'll begin with these. Begin with a oxidized copper block and then 7 stripped warped logs above it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These go either side of the door, then directly opposite on the back wall, and then on either side of the side walls. Once those are in, switch to some oxidized cut copper and we'll be connecting these along the bottom in the ground, as this will add a nice clean look underneath the windows. You can then build up with glass to the height of these posts. Make sure you leave this front section open here where we have our doorway. Now that we have the base walls in, we can start adding in some decoration, beginning with some posts which will go in front of these ones as well as on the corners. We'll be following a pattern here, beginning always with some oxidized cut copper, then 3 stripped warped stems, warped blocks, some oxidized copper, 2 more warped stems, and then place in an oxidized cut copper and a warped planks on top and come forward with some warped stems. When you're doing this on the corner, you begin the same way, going up with your pattern of blocks, but then make sure you come out to both sides when you place in your stripped warped stems at the top. On to the last one now. And there we go, we've gone all the way around the greenhouse. Next, place a layer of warped blocks all the way around the shape of your build, straight on top of the glass. And for this you can go right over where the doorway is. We'll also add some more decorations to each of these dividing sections in the window, starting with a button at the bottom, some trapdoors in front of this section here, 2 more buttons, and then a fence. And I'll repeat this decoration all the way around, remembering on the corners I'll need to do it on 2 sides. Here's how it's looking so far. Now the wonderful thing about this style of Victorian greenhouse is that symmetry and repetition are your friend, so we're going to be having the same window decoration across all 9 of the windows. Once you get the hang of it once, it'll be easy to create. We'll begin with 2 oxidized copper stairs, and we're creating a pattern going up the side of each of the windows, coming up 2 high with some warp stairs, and then placing 2 upside down. Then we'll rotate and place in a warped wart block, and then dark prismarine stairs placed upside down to create this kind of shape. Then take some fences, warped fences, and build all the way up to the top of these dark prismarine blocks. Next we'll be creating a little archway going over this top section, beginning with some more fences, then using some dark prismarine stairs to create the archway itself. I'll also place in some warped slabs with trapdoors in front, build up the center with some fences, and place 2 trapdoors on either side like this, and then I'll run fences straight across the top. Here's how that window section should look. Now that you've got this built, you can replicate this design in all of the other window spaces. Almost finished with these windows, I'm just putting in the last one now. And there we go, there's the ornate window decoration complete. Next we'll work on filling in this door section, beginning with the back wall and creating the door frame. Start by building up 3 high on either side with the warped stairs, and then place 1 upside down on top of this stack. Place a dark prismarine on top of these, and create a little archway with warped stairs and an oxidized cut copper slab, like this. Then place 3 stripped warped hyphae. These are the stripped warped logs where they have the same texture on all of the sides, and you can fill in the rest of this wall with some glass. Then take some warped trapdoors and place them 4 high to finish off the shape of this door frame. Next we want to add some decorations to this window, which will tie in with what we have on the other window and accentuate the arch shape to the door. So I'll begin with 2 warped stairs on either side, which will mimic the arch shape we create here. And I'm adding a dark prismarine block in the center with a warped button. Then I'll come in with some fences, coming right up and across the top like this, And then we're going to have a similar design as we had on the windows, with some dark prismarine stairs, some warped slabs, and some trapdoors. You can see how this window is now tied in with the rest of the build. I also want to create a glass doorway for the front of this build, and for this I'll be using some panes and some end rods. The end rods will make great handles for the door. Now if you don't have access to end rods, that's totally fine. You can substitute this for something like a chain, but I really like the subtle glow an end rod adds to the entryway. So you can see I've built up 3 high and come out on a curve like this with the end rod for the handle. Then I'm going to have a layer of cyan stained glass for a pop of colour. And then on the final layer, I'll just place 2 glass panes. This means that the door looks like it will fit into the opening we have. And I'll create this on the other side as well. Just like that. With all the walls in, we can start preparing for the domed roof. I'm going to begin with some oxidized copper, and I'm placing these on top of each of these fence sections in the center of each of these 5 gaps. I'll then fill in the rest with some warped planks. Then you'll want to switch to some dark prismarine stairs and place these upside down in front of the blocks we've just placed, connecting these stripped warped logs. Finally, in each of the corners, place a dark prismarine slab. Here's how that should look. You can see that the copper adds a little pop of contrast from underneath. For this roof, we'll start by adding the copper sections, which will break up the large glass dome. So we're going to work on the front and back ones, which should be centered on these walls by placing an oxidized copper, then an oxidized copper. We'll come back on a diagonal and build up 2, then 1, then 1, and then an oxidized cut copper like this. And now I'll do the same from the other side. These two should be level but shouldn't connect in the middle. Next, I'll add a copper section on the 2 side walls. This should be centered again. And I'll come up 1 oxidized copper, a cut copper. Then I'll come back 2, then back 1, then back 2, and 2 again. Once again, this should be level, but they shouldn't connect. And I'll create the same pattern on the other side. I've come to the side of the build because I now want to add some copper sections that come from the corner and move diagonally towards the center. Now each of these corner ones are the same, but you've just got to change the direction that you're heading. So I'm going to start with a copper block, then a cut copper one, coming in on a diagonal like this, the block on top. I'll come in again on a diagonal, moving up each time, and backwards and up like this. I'll come in on a diagonal again and upwards, and then one more in on the diagonal. So here is how it should look from the side, from the front, and from above. This should also finish one below the ones that we built originally. Now I'm going to create the same thing on this side, once again working towards the center. So 1, a cut with 1 on top, back in on the diagonal and up again, and in the diagonal and up again, and in on the diagonal again. Here's how it should look. Now I'll do the same thing on this other side. once again following my pattern and working towards the center. Here's how it should all look from above. And you can check that they're even, as everything should line up. And you should be left with kind of a rectangular section in the center. Next, we'll fill in this gap by creating a decorative section on the top of the build. I'm going to build one in on each of these with some oxidized copper, and then place in some stripped warped hyphae. You can see how I'm creating a circular shape with these blocks. Next, I will place a warped block in the center here like this, with warped stairs either side. And I'll also come forward in front of each of these warped blocks with a stair. Then I'll place a fence on either side like this underneath the stairs. And I'll switch to some trapdoors to create a circular shape like this by placing them on a diagonal. Here's how it should look from above so far. Now I want to grab some dark prismarine slabs, and these get placed on top of the stairs and the warped blocks, as well as on the lower level of these blocks here on the center to fill it in. That way the top of your build is spawn proof. Next, I'll go in with some warped fences like this. And using some end rods, I'll add a little extra decoration, placing them on every other fence. Once again, if you don't have end rods, you could use chains here. Here's how it's looking. Now we are all prepped to add in the glass to the sections of the dome. We'll be working in the copper divided sections that we've created, and you can see that the two on the front and the two on the back are the same and mirrored, but we'll go slowly as we are working with glass here, and it can get a little confusing. So we'll begin by building straight across the bottom of this front section, and then I'll build 5 along on top of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This should leave 3 blocks free at the end here. I'll then fill in a 2x2 square on this section here, and then connect up to the copper block on the other side. Then I'll come across 3. And it's always helpful to take a step back and check it out every now and then. It can be a little tricky to build with glass, as you can't see your edges quite as well, but if you take your time, it'll look wonderful. So you can see I filled in this 3 long section here. Then I'll build 1 up on top of it and connect up to the copper. Then I'm going to place in a block just behind it like this. And then I'll fill in the little L shape with some copper blocks. Here's how it should look. While I've got this design in my mind, I'll also fill in the other side, which is just the same but mirrored. Once again, starting by building straight across the bottom, and then 5 on top of this. Then I'll fill in the 2x2 square and build across to the other copper. Next, I have my 3 blocks and my 3 blocks here. Coming up and building across to the copper again. Placing 1 in behind this glass and then creating the little L shape. I can then also rotate round to the back of the build and fill in these 2 large sections, which are just the same as the front. Now I'll rotate round to the right side of the build here and I'm going to begin filling in these two smaller sections, and once again the two on both sides are the same, they're just mirrored. I'll begin by building 5 across the bottom here and then 3 on top. Then I'll come up 2 and connect to the other copper block like this. Then I have just a layer straight across and one once more again, and I'll build back 1 here. Then I'll just fill in the rest with a little T shape like this. Here's how it should look. I'll do just the same on the other side, making sure to mirror it. And just as before, I'll come over to the other side of the build now and fill in the glass. Now, a helpful tip if you're having a lot of trouble building with glass here is to go in with a placeholder block first, for example dirt, and you can actually fill in all of these sections just as you would with glass with the dirt first. That way you can check that you've placed all your blocks correctly and it's much easier to see. Once you've got the shape down, you can go in and replace the dirt with the glass. Here's how the build should look. Now, to match the ornate detail that we've got in the windows, we want to add some details to the top of the build. I'll begin with some stripped warped hyphae on each of the corners with a warped fence and an end rod on top. I'll then take some warped trapdoors and place these all the way around the outside of the build, and then flip them up like this. Here's how that looks. Next, I'll go in with some more warped trapdoors coming to either side of the build, and I'm going to place these going up the glass like this. So I'm 1 away from the center copper here, and I'm just coming up to the top like this. I'll place 2 on top of the glass here, and then I'll come up in on a diagonal so they're right next to these copper blocks. And I'll do the same on the other side. Here's how that looks. And I'll do this on the right side of the build as well. Then I want to create some similar trapdoor detail on the front and back of the build. So I'll come either side of this copper, leaving a 1 block gap, and build up like this. And since these sections of glass are much larger, I'll also be putting in one next to this row of copper, starting with an unflipped trapdoor, then 2 flipped, an unflipped, a flipped and a flipped. So you can see this one is going up on a diagonal, and I'll do this on the other side as well. Once again, rotate round to the back of the build and create this same trapdoor detail. Once you've added in these details to the roof, it's important to take a step back and look all the way around your build to make sure you haven't missed putting in any of your buttons, trapdoors, or any of the other details that really make this Victorian greenhouse so ornate. Now that I'm happy with the details in the build, let's look at how I might decorate a Victorian greenhouse. You can see I've added a winding pathway leading up to it, and I've created this using some coral to create a textured gravel look. I come up into my greenhouse, where I've created quite an organic looking space. I've hung some vines and glowberries from the ceiling, which not only fill up the dome with greenery, but the glowberries add a nice light to the room. I've added a little pond in one corner and have put trees on the diagonal in 2 of the corners. It's also a nice idea to create some variations in height in your ground, so I've added a little raised section at the back here. And of course, when you've got your pond, you'll have a slightly lowered section where the water is. I've also added some built elements with some lighting and this little seat to sit and enjoy the zone. It's also important to think about decorating around your greenhouse, so I've added some simple planters in front of each of the windows, and I've added a path off to the side with a seating area. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Please like and subscribe and consider checking out my Patreon. Your support really means the world to me. I'll see you in another video.